Coming up on today's episode, we got some fusion news and some space news. It's the end of 2022, which happened, and nothing really else to talk about. Let's get ludicrous. Hello and welcome to Our Ludicrous Future. This is the podcast we talk about all the cool future stuff that's making today happen that's going to make tomorrow totally ludicrous. And I screwed that up a little bit, but let's just move on.
I'm Joe Scott. Probably the best intro we've ever had, and we did it live.
I know.
Yeah. Well, sorry, you were saying?
I was saying that I'm Joe Scott, and I'm here with Ben Sullins and Tim Dodd. And, guys, we're only doing this because we haven't talked to each other in a long time, and it's Christmas, so we want to kind of get together. There really hasn't been a lot of news that's come out worth talking about, really.
Nothing.
So I'm bored already. You know, what's happened with me? I fit 3 taquitos in my mouth the other day. That was pretty interesting.
3.
So that's worth.
Up from
we could talk about
record.
that. Ben, anything interesting happen with you since the last time we talked?
You know, I bought a new shirt, and you know, it's a little bit. There's like a new piece of art back there, but
that's noteworthy.
Yeah, it's really a lot. You know what I mean? We should really get into it, I think.
Okay, yeah, we could talk about that. Tim, anything?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I told you guys this is a pretty big deal, but I did buy like a different electric leaf blower recently.
What?
No,
but that's not even the big news. That's not even the big news. No.
Oh.
Here's actually some drama. I was using it and it ran out of electricity,
and
so I had to swap batteries.
Electric crap.
I know. I had to change the batteries in it. Like
I bet it's more of a carbon footprint too than the two bangers.
It could have been. So that's probably the biggest thing that's happened this year.
Yeah,
the swapping of batteries, 40 volt, Ryobi. So pretty intense.
I actually have an analysis of that, so we're going to get into 3 hours of exactly
3 hours.
Tim is killing the planet with his.
No, it's
Ryobi.
an analysis on how I walked from the deck into the garage to swap the battery and then back out to the deck to continue blowing leaves. That's the analysis. Actual carbon footprint, like where I stepped physically throughout my property.
The carbon in the leaves that you
carbon shoes
Leaves carbon footprints.
No, here's a little side note before we even really dive into this. We did get together and have a great chat about 2 months ago, almost exactly. And that's now the lost recording of Terabithica or something. Like, we'll never get that back. It disappeared into the ether, unfortunately. And so this is our attempt to make it up to ourselves and you guys.
That was my fault. I'll take responsibility for that one. I could post it and share it if anyone wants to decipher it. The problem was everything was out of sync. And after 3 hours of diving in, I'm like, oh, I got it. And then I didn't get it. It was just like, And I think it was a 3 hour recording. So I was like, this is going to take me 17 days.
We can make it a community thing.
Yeah, crowdsource it.
Yeah.
I bet I could find someone on Upwork to do it for $5 or something like that.
Maybe. But we are smart enough this time to do some backup recordings just in case, because last time we relied on Riverside to bring us all of the audio and video goodiness, and we forgot, as we do with every time we record something, that we should probably have other options.
Yes. So my apologies for messing that one up. But we're here now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're probably going to do a little bit of a year in review, more or less, because it's the end of 2022, which, frankly, there's just genuinely way too much stuff to talk about. It's ridiculous. 2022 was slammed. In the space world, just absolutely way too much to talk about. In the world, way too much to talk about. I mean, I just feel like it's nuts. I don't know. How do you guys feel about, I'm not alone, right? It was crazy, right?
Just before we started recording, I was like, well, this could be a year in review. And then I went into a slight panic because it's oh my God, how do we even break all that down? Because I haven't had a chance to even think about it.
Well, what about a theme? What was the biggest theme of the year for you guys in the, stuff that you pay attention to? For me, it's the AI stuff. It's just how it's really progressing. I've been sort of a skeptic. I still am in ways. Like until my iPad can heat up my coffee, like I'm not impressed, you know. But like AI is supposed to do everything and change everything, but it's like generally impressive now, the things that are happening. So I think we should get into some of that stuff. We don't have to now, but that's like my biggest takeaway of the year. Like in the EV world, there are new EVs, and some of them are incredible. That's it. We can talk about those, but like, you know, same old, right?
I would say well, let's start off with all of our keywords, and we can maybe dive into them. I'd say this year, 2022, actually is the year of NASA. Just in general, having a very positive light shone upon them for, you know, a lot of the things that NASA works on are like years and years and years and years in the backlog in the making. So to see it just kind of, so many of them came to fruition in 2022, you know, between James Webb and DART and obviously SLS and the Artemis program. It's definitely been an awesome year just for people to get revitalized by NASA's work in spaceflight, you know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. What about you, Joe?
Man, that's a good question. I kind of feel like this is the year that we're starting to deal with the repercussions of the pandemic. Like the last couple of years have been kind of dealing with the pandemic itself, but now we're kind of dealing with the aftermath of it and still putting the pieces back together and figuring out, you know, politically, financially, and all that, what's going on. I mean, this was a crazy election year, obviously, but it always feels like, you know, we have these big events happen, these sort of shocks to our society, and we think like, oh, we're past it, everything's going to be good. But then it's like, but there's all these aftershocks. There's all these things that follow it that we don't mentally tie in with the 2 years that we just experienced, you know?
Right.
And so like
the aftershock.
People tend to sort of forget that like, oh yeah, we're still dealing with this massive worldwide calamity that just happened.
And it's certainly not over, right? Like if you look at China and what's going on, or, you know, it seems like they're easing up some of their policies, but I mean, you know,
but look what had to happen for them to ease them up, you know, all the protests
like
and stuff.
it's nuts. I mean, I go back to, and I can't recommend enough the book, The Fourth Turning, because
I need to read that.
It is, I'm not a religious person, but I have been referring to it as the good book, because you look at it and you go, oh, the thing that will blow people's minds, if you look at the predictions that are there, they said an authoritarian leader would come to power in the U.S. They said that there would be a global pandemic, just like countless things. The book was written in 1997. Like the internet barely existed, right? It was like you still had AOL discs you had to put in to connect to, you know, with your modem.
You got mail.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was just like, and these guys are not incredibly smart. They just studied history and looked at how things have went. So you're not wrong, Joe. I mean, you know, but unfortunately, I think there's still more to come, because we haven't, like what happens, the general theme of the book is that history is cyclical, not linear. So if you think about time, it's like, oh, this thing happened and then that thing happened. It's like, no. Big things that happen at a certain point in time in which that period of history is going through a certain period of the cycle. And so that's why certain events blow up and become world wars and other ones become, you know, Vietnam, right? It's the scale, like the conflict could have resulted in the same kind of net result, but because socially and society and everything wasn't at the same point, they went different directions. So it's fascinating. But to your point, you know, it's the cycle that we're in. And unfortunately, I still think there's a little bit more, you know, more vegetables we have to eat. Yeah. The pandemic itself may be going away, but the pain of it is still going to be here for a while.
We've just entered the crisis phase.
We've been in it for a little while, but and the hope was, if you follow these guys, if the hope was that the pandemic would be the thing. Because what happens is every 80 or 100 years, we have a thing that happens, and it leads to a whole different way of life afterwards, known as the high, where everyone, like, we're all together, you know, everyone come together now. It's all great. We're all like living because we defeated the enemy, right? So rewind, it was World War II. That was the last one in our history here. Pre-World War II, it was the Civil War. The Civil War. Because the Great Depression was
the previous cycle.
The previous cycle.
Yeah,
100 years or so prior to that. The previous one to that was the Revolution, the Revolutionary War. And then if you jump back to England, There was in the 1600s, either the consciousness revolution or something. There was another thing, right? Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, like how these things. So we're right at the end. We're close to the end, hopefully.
I am sad that the pandemic did not unite humans. Instead, it really felt like it divided people a lot and isolated people and ostracized people and gave just made that spectrum way more like contrasted. You know, I just think the removed kind of the middle where people. You know what I noticed? This is not meant to be pointed at all, but I feel like 10 years ago, I never knew or cared what my neighbors' like political beliefs were or their like religious beliefs were or their sexual orientations or anything like that. They just were my neighbors. And I don't know if the pandemic kind of pushed this, but all of a sudden I feel like it's so common for people to put their beliefs and their lifestyles and who they are out there first and foremost, before anything else, before you get to know them, before you get to do anything. You see that. You see signs of candidates out and about. You see, flags and stuff. Like, and I don't see anything inherently wrong with that. It's more just an observation. But it is interesting that that's like, I wonder what that does now to make it so. Is it harder to interact with your neighbors with someone that you might disagree with or have different ideologies then? Because it's like out there first. So before you even ever walk up to their lawn and offer them cookies for moving in, you see that and you go, oh, screw these guys,
Yeah. You make a judgment on somebody immediately based off of their political or belief system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's become like almost normalized to do that, to put stuff out very publicly first and foremost, almost as like you're supposed to do that now.
This is who I am. This is my identity. Yeah. And that's to the good books credit. What they talk about is this is that time in this period of the crisis where this is how we are, right? And if you rewind to World War II, same kind of thing. There were people that said we shouldn't get involved and whatever, and then Pearl Harbor, and now you have to be involved, right? Things like that. The crazy thing is to look back at history and go, well, 9/11 wasn't this? Like you guys remember 9/11, right? And how terrible and all that. But like, did you have the same feeling? I remember I was 19 years old or something, 20 years old. I had no care about politics or geopolitical stuff. Who cared? I was just like, trying to chase girls and drink and party, whatever. I was 19, 20 years old, And then after that, I was just like, America, let's go. It was just like all of a sudden, everybody, like George Bush went from like one of the most hated presidents to like one of the most loved, overnight. And so I think so anyone that lived through that, I think maybe that would be the closest idea of this concept of like, yeah, the world is crazy right now, but this is a part of the cycle, right? This is a part of the winter, right? And then after the winter comes the spring. And so all as good or as bad as it's going, like it will change.
Cycle.
It's not going to be that way forever, no matter how it is.
How did we get into geopolitics and belief systems and stuff when we have so much to talk about from the 2022 year? I see where we're going, that it's some kind of big full circle, but we got a lot to crack down on.
Well, I started this whole thing off with a little comedy bit, making fun of like the big elephant in the room, and we haven't gotten to the elephant yet. So people who are listening are just like, are they going to talk about it or not?
Let's go.
So let's go, Tim. What you got going on, buddy? Let's hear about it.
Anything new?
Again, that leaf blower thing was actually a pretty
that
big
was
ordeal.
Amazing. That was so cool.
Yeah. No,
I'm screaming, sorry.
I was able to finally announce last week. An announcement came out that I was selected to be a crew member for the Dear Moon project.
Oh,
it is very wild. Very wild.
Yeah.
Wow. This is. I saw one of my crew members on the Today Show this morning, and frankly, that fake canned applause makes me feel better than him. I'm sure.
Definitely better. Yeah.
This has been obviously something in the works for a while, especially for a little overview quick from MZ Yusaku Maezawa, the person, the gentleman behind Dear Moon and the Dear Moon project. He originally was in talks with SpaceX. SpaceX in 2017 announced that someone had paid them to fly them around the moon. Like that ironically is like literally what started me making videos on YouTube was that announcement. Not Dear Moon. It wasn't like Dear Moon at the time. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. We didn't know that.
It was going to be on a Dragon at the time. Right?
Yeah, but it was going to be on a Dragon, and it was just a press release from SpaceX saying, hey, guess what? We're announcing today that someone, we don't know, we're not going to say who, purchased a ride around the moon. And that was enough to make me like, I got to share this. And so that's literally like the first time I set up a camera and shot like a video about like just describing something about spaceflight as like a kind of a news item.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Were we already recording?
No, February 27th, 2017. It's like what
2017
kind of started my YouTube channel. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that announcement triggered it.
The announcement.
And then you were there at the thing, and I think by that time we were at least talking about a podcast.
I think we had started the podcast in 2018. Then it came out as the Dear Moon Project.
Right.
And that's when Yusaku Maezawa presented, himself to the public.
God, that was
basically
4 years ago?
Yeah, that was over 4 years ago already.
I remember you being there. Like, I think you were texting about it. Like, I'm going to the thing, and I might be able to ask Elon a question. You were like excited for the fact of like being able to talk to this guy.
Yes.
And then you guys didn't you get an interview of him at that event, or was that later?
Not then. That was the Starship one. This one though, I did ask a question about like how many engines were on the Starship because the poster had like 7 sea level ones as opposed to any vacuum optimized. And I remember Elon said specifically like, "Oh, you noticed that? Good eye." And I was like, "Oh,
you're like, which one?"
Exactly,
because they're different colors.
I'm heterochromatic. Do you like the green one or the dark one? Yeah. So. I was there, and actually, I was actually looking for this the other day, like before the announcement. I was trying to see how far back I could go on just regular text messages, not iMessage, because my mom is still like it's green SMS, like text message. I remember her as the announcement happened. She knew I was there. She was watching it along at home, and she goes, "Don't tell me you're gonna go on that, right?" And I go, "Mom, there's no way I would get chosen for this. Like this is."
You lied to your mom.
Wow. Did they know this? Do they know this? The Dear Moon people are watching right now going, "Oh, that's it. He lied to his mom."
To his mother. No, it was just genuinely, I was like, there is zero chance I would get chosen for something like this. Why would I be chosen for this? That was the reality, especially like 2018.
Like, who am I?
Exactly, 100%. Like, it wasn't even being humble. It's just like a factual, he's looking for like, big name like filmmakers and stuff and artists and well-known photographers. I assumed it was gonna be like James Cameron and Celine Dion and all of these like huge name people, LeBron James or something in space. So it was just not even in the question. And I remember thinking like this is the most beautiful thing. This is gonna be incredible for the people on board. Like what's this gonna look like for humanity? What's the implications of sending people up that are, their mission is to just share their experience and create something out of the experience as opposed to the astronauts who, the Apollo astronauts who had to land on the moon,
Yeah, real job.
Yeah, big time job. No one's really had the luxury of just being able to absorb it as a human. Like, that's basically what Dear Moon is like a handful of people whose sole purpose during that trip is to absorb it, which is huge. I mean, what's that going to be like? What's that going to do? What's that going to... So obviously you guys know I applied, I think it was like February. They had an open public application process.
Wow.
I applied and made a video. It had to be 1 minute video, which is very hard for me. Made a video and, I got into the next rounds and just kind of kept going through the selection process, which I kind of can't really talk too much about. But before you knew it, I had a Zoom call with the team for like a final interview. And it was actually just MZ saying like, "Hey, I'd like you to be a crew member." I don't even remember it, to be honest. Like, and I've kind of been this whole time like intentionally.
You're like, wait, what are you doing on the call? Wait a minute. Yeah. Wait, what's going on?
Exactly. And I mean, to be honest, like I intentionally just let myself not be even thinking about it too much. Just kept myself busy with everything else. Not only like to not get my hopes up, but to not even like why worry about it? Why
Have you started recording or documenting things? I mean, I know you make videos, but I mean, like, let's say a couple years after or a year after you guys go, are you gonna, if you have filmed stuff now, just like a daily vlog, so you like into your phone, like, hey, here's what I'm doing. Yeah, it doesn't have to be good footage, just any footage. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That type of stuff is in the talks and in the works. It hasn't yet been officially like kickstarted, per se. I mean, some things here and there. But like that is actually there's a handful of us that are considered. I'm kind of going to be trying to do some things with live streaming stuff and
I saw you say that, like,
and trying to do some
Tim,
things.
You're setting yourself up here.
I know. Jeez, if I can't do a live stream while plugged into a NASA building, and it still goes bad, what am I going to do around the moon?
You just launched the van up there.
Yeah. Hey, I already built this thing. Just throw it in here. It's Starship. Got plenty of room.
Like, trust me, it'll be cheaper just to let this guy go. Park this guy. Plenty of room in Starship. Yeah. What do you mean?
It's up in space and that dish comes out.
The pole accidentally pokes through the hole of the vehicle.
Oh no, turn it off.
That's amazing. Now, you'll be probably one of the most knowledgeable people on the ship, right? I was thinking about that. Like, I was talking to our old producer, Ben Price. We just had breakfast the other day, and he was like, can we just talk about Tim doing the thing? And then we were like, yeah, I guess so. Because obviously this is what you do, super knowledgeable. I mean, does anyone else going have much understanding of anything that's happening?
I mean,
that you were aware of? What a full flow stage combustion engine is?
Right. Yeah.
Well,
do they know as much as me or more or less than me? Well, like, I'll be the barometer.
Yeah. No, but don't forget MZ has trained for 6 months to fly on Soyuz, and he flew to the International Space Station last year.
Right.
So he definitely, he's actually a seasoned astronaut at this point, has proper in-flight experience, which is actually awesome. Like, that honestly helps me feel just better in general, knowing that he's gone through it, that he had a great time, and all that stuff just makes, and that he's really excited for the next one. I'd be more nervous if, like, he went up there and was like, well, I don't know, guys. It wasn't very good. I think I'm backing out. So, obviously in general, like, that's great. There were talks but this is again, like, public information, like, way back in the day. I remember there were talks about potentially having a professional astronaut or two, on board the mission. I don't know if that's, I genuinely don't know, like, what the status is on that. I don't know if it's that necessary when Starship is so freaking autonomous,
right.
Same with Dragon. Like, we'll go through some training regimen. I don't know exactly what yet. We haven't quite hashed all that out yet, but I'll gladly step up and do as much additional training as possible if there's the ability to have more certifications or something to to do more of that stuff. I would gladly do that. I mean, 100%. So
because I would have to imagine if, like, they need to ask someone a question aboard, they're probably going to pick you, right?
You mean other crew members?
Yeah. If it's just the people that they've said are going, and we don't know, don't know. But I'm saying if it's just you guys that have been announced, you guys are going. I would have to imagine if there's a question about something, can you do this?
Right.
It's going to be to Tim because you're going to be the probably. I mean, maybe MZ. I don't know, but, like, you're going to know how that whole thing is built already. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and that sort of has been the dynamic, even with, like, the time that we've spent with crew. A lot of them do ask questions, just general spaceflight questions, general. What do you think about this, or why this? And that's even something that I pitched, like, in one of the, one of the things was like, hey, this is what I do for a living already, is I talk about this stuff. I help answer people's questions. Even obviously if I'm not selected, if you guys have any questions of something I can help out with, like, that's what I do, and I'm happy to keep doing that, obviously. So I think that is kind of part of the expectation of me on the trip. And
it would make sense.
Obviously,
I could imagine
to do that.
People, other crew members on there going, what's happening now? And you're like, oh, we're in this phase or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, those kind of things. It'd be so different, though, because you're, obviously to date have only been sitting here on Earth going, oh, that's what's happening. But it'd probably be different inside of the thing going, I guess that's what, Max Q feels like or whatever.
100%. Yep. It's, can't wait. It's hard to imagine.
That is the orbital insertion burn.
Yeah, it's going to be
well,
nuts.
I would imagine stuff like that they would they would know that by the time
I'm
they
sure
show
there'll
up.
be enough training that they'll
Yeah.
have been familiarized with. Oh, here comes booster separation, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Knowing the timeline of events. I'm sure that'll be drilled in by then quite well for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Know how to use the toilets and
yeah.
heat up
The
the
mag.
Hopefully there's toilets. Starship is big enough that it should have plenty of room for redundancy on those types of things. Multiple toilets.
Oh, right. That happened on the other one, right? Where it went out.
Yeah. There is a toilet issue on Inspiration 4, and that was only 3 days. So we're going to be like 6 days to a week.
Ugh.
So I really hope, and at 10 people or whatever it is, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Like, you'd better hope that they have some really good facilities on board for this one.
You have to wear a maximum absorbency garment,
For the whole
a
time.
mag.
Yeah. That
It'd
would
be like
not
a
be
Buc-ee's
ideal.
in space with all the stalls.
Yeah. One of the things, here's, again, purely my opinion, my speculation. So the next Polaris, so I don't even know if last time we talked, like, if we mentioned, like, Jared Isaacman, the Inspiration 4 guy, who founded that and started that, has 3 more missions that he's come up with for Polaris 1, 2, and 3. They're also Dragon. First 2 are Dragon missions. The first one's going to be an EVA, extravehicular activity. So they're actually going to open the Dragon capsule, and 2 of the 4 crew members will go out and like experience a spacewalk. So that will be a capability that SpaceX not only has but has done. The second one, they're talking about doing a Hubble mission, Hubble reboost mission, which is incredible. They're currently studying that alongside NASA. And the third one, they're talking about Jared being the first person to fly on the first crewed Starship mission. So that'd be presumptuously before Dear Moon.
Oh, right.
But it brings me to the question, if he's already going to prove out extravehicular activities and all that stuff, will that be an option on Dear Moon? Will there be an airlock? And could we go and do a spacewalk around the moon?
So they give you a steak, and now you're asking for sauce.
Yeah.
Hey, if it was like, hey, this is an additional, we have to make you a custom spacesuit. We have to train you for this much. It's going to cost another $12 million or something. I would crowdfund that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's
And be
get
like,
Tim.
Yeah. I mean, if we're doing it, right? I mean, you might as well.
And you're going to poke a hole in your glove and just fly around.
No, I do not want to Martian it at all in any way, shape.
You don't want to be Iron Man?
Oh, man.
Ideally not. But yeah, that's kind of the biggest news, I think, for me this year.
Yeah, I would agree.
It wasn't anything bigger than that, really?
Although, like we said at the beginning of the show, it was definitely the year of NASA. Holy crap, did NASA have a busy year with some really, really, really big launches and big events. Should we talk about some of those, or do we want to
Artemis,
kind of
right?
float around? Yeah.
We got Artemis, we got DART.
James Webb.
James Webb.
Well, going online. Yeah, because that launched it right at the end of last year. So
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
it went online in
I think that is an ESA thing because they're the ones that launched it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's true.
Tell me about Artemis. So it went up. It did its thing. It just splashed down, what, like a day or so ago?
Yesterday, right?
Sunday.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's today?
So yeah, Artemis 1, the first all-up test of the Orion capsule and the SLS rocket, the Space Launch System. Had an awesome. Here, I can share my screen. We've got a little article here for that, and it was really just a flawless mission. I gotta go ahead and say right up front, for anyone that worked at NASA or Boeing or Lockheed or Northrop Grumman, ESA and Thales Space / United Launch Alliance, all those involved, absolutely incredible. After years and years, and I think some frustration in the slowness and the cost of it, it finally all was just amazing. So on November 16th at 1:47 and 44 seconds a.m. Eastern Time is when SLS left the ground for the first time, carrying the Orion capsule on top of it. And it ended up being a 25-day, 10-hour, and 53-minute long mission, which went out into distant retrograde orbit around the moon, which means it flew actually further away. Okay, I'm going to qualify this like 8 ways because I believe it was Apollo 10's ascent module got flung out from lunar orbit and is out there like floating, like out orbiting the sun, and it's further away than anything else has ever been that's human rated. So I'll say it's the furthest away. It's the furthest away any human rated spacecraft has flown from Earth that was still flying, like controlled flying, because the other thing wasn't, and it returning. There we go. How about that? It's so funny.
If you put enough, definitions on there, you can be the first at everything.
Yeah.
Everything can be a first if you add enough definitions.
This is like 100%. If you ever want to launch a book, you do it on Amazon in a super niche category, and just have your friends and family buy a few copies, and now you're like a best-selling author, right? Like it's the same kind of thing. Like you niche down enough, and there you go.
It's kind of like the guy that made the oh no, or what sound is it? I don't remember the Roblox sound or whatever. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
The oof?
Yeah, the oof. Have you seen the stuff
H Bomber guy had like a 2.5 hour video about that just came out.
It's incredible. I don't know why I clicked on it, and I couldn't help
I know.
Watch the whole stupid
I don't
thing.
know how he does it. He does like these massively long videos on a very tiny specific thing, and then he gets millions of views for it.
Unbelievable. But the moral of the story is that guy had multiple Guinness World Records for biggest video game concert and most video game concert period or something, just a really obscure, like you were saying, really obscure record. Anyway, jeez. Orion successfully ended up splashing down on Sunday and nailed it's like a bullseye landing. They did what's called a skip reentry for this.
Yeah, I want you to talk about that because I found that really interesting.
Yeah, so it's actually been a capability for a long time. I mean, frankly, the Apollo program could have done this and stuff like this, but the problem is it takes a lot of guidance and control and precision, everything to be able to actually do this. But what they did, obviously when you're coming in, when you're looking at the Earth, the spherical Earth, and you look at the tiny little atmosphere, it's just this little itty bitty band around the, and relative to everything else, it's just this thin little thing. They basically come in and they bleed off some of the velocity kind of by going through it, threading the needle, but that it also literally kind of skips off the atmosphere like a rock. But what that does, if you do that in a way that predictable way, it allows you to kind of poke back up, get back out into space a little bit. The altitude actually raises back up. It allows the spacecraft time to cool down, but it also gives it a little bit of time to completely retarget and have a more accurate ballistic trajectory from that point on. So they kind of do this maneuver. They dip in, and then because the spacecraft, even though it's like a truncated cone, the capsule shape where it's like this, even though it's a truncated cone. They can still actually just by rolling it, pretend this is the heat shield here on the bottom. By rolling it, they can actually steer it because there's actually there's a little bit of a weight offset, a mass offset. Like say you have the heat shield down here, they actually put the center of mass slightly off from the very middle. What that does is creates a little bit of a lifting vector, kind of like if you're snowboarding or surfing, like how you shift your weight on it. It changes the direction. It has. If you're right down the middle, you wouldn't really be able to change direction. But if you shift your center of mass in one way or the other, it provides an asymmetrical balance, I guess. So basically, there's a lifting vector. We'll pretend the handle of the mug is the lifting vector. So they can literally just roll the spacecraft, and that can make it dip up out of the atmosphere. They can roll it down and push deeper into the atmosphere, or slew left and right if they just need to cut some velocity or at least. Target, however. So they did that, and what it did is just made it so they had an absolute bullseye landing. Yeah. I don't know if that made sense. Sorry, that was a long.
No, I remember them talking about that with the Mars landings, like Perseverance and Curiosity, that they have that way of sort of steering it by turning the capsule in the air. Yeah,
it's amazing, and I mean we kind of did something like this with the space shuttle. The space shuttle, as it entered and re-entered, it would would do these S turns. To a different degree. So the computer had to be constantly determining, am I long? Am I short? Am I, how much velocity do I need to bleed off? And the reason, if you go up and down, that makes huge differences. The atmosphere all of a sudden gets thinner And then you can't, your maneuvers don't make as much sense, or your atmosphere gets really thick and slows you down too fast and heats you up. So by staying at relatively the same altitude or, same path, but going left and right, you can kind of cancel out your left and right motions, but end up, changing your velocity quite a bit.
So when you say they are doing this, who's they?
The spacecraft is doing it autonomously.
Oh, okay.
So they being the people that programmed it, basically.
Gotcha.
The computers.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I was thinking, Buzz Lightyear's in there doing something. But, but like if you're talking about that, you're like flipping upside down and going sideways. It'd be really hard to know what's happening. You know what I mean? Like, wait, which way am I going right now? And you can't see really, right? There's like little portholes. So
you're going backwards.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. But it was absolutely picture perfect splashdown, and really just showed, it was the exact opposite of Starship prototypes, which is, where, and just programmatically, like they had to do everything. They had to do this perfect. If this had blown up or failed, like the whole thing could have failed. Like the program could have been completely dead. If SLS blew up, in flight, if Orion had, suffered a massive failure and didn't survive re-entry or something, like it wouldn't be the same as the first orbital Starship test. Like we kind of expected to not go perfect at all,
I think that's the question, right? That's the multi-billion-dollar question: is whose approach is the most capital efficient, or at least me being an economist, that's how I think, right? Because these guys spent way more money than they said they were, right? Way over budget. It took way longer than they said it was going to take, but they nailed it.
But they delivered, yeah.
Right? Whereas Starship, it's like, cool, you're seeing lots of progress, or I haven't been paying that much attention, so maybe it hasn't been much lately, but like you went from a water tower, the Grasshopper or whatever it was called, Starhopper, to like something that resembles a rocket, but like, okay, how far, how long is it going to take, and how much more money to get to the same point, I guess, Yeah. Although they're very different, I understand all that, but a point being like, the approach of like
very
cheap
different ideologies.
Yeah, data science-y, I'm just going to try it a million times and find the one that works, or I'm going to sit here for a gazillion years with all the smartest people in the world calculating every last little detail and then nail it,
Right.
Which one is the correct way? It's hard to say,
Well, also everything on the SLS had been done before. I mean, there were literally parts from previous. They were just cobbled together,
Yeah.
I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but like they already knew how all that stuff worked.
They have like the IKEA kitchen builder thing, but for spaceships, right? You just kind of go in.
Well, and that's a bit of it too. Is like the legacy. Although that's a bad, that can be a bad thing. It can be expensive. It can be slow moving. There is that legacy of information and knowledge and workforce that is relatively familiar with everything still. So did you guys see, actually, I don't know if you guys were paying close enough attention, Ben probably for sure not, but during the actual launch attempt, the vehicle was fueled up and they had to take a red team, a group of three individuals out there on the launch pad while it was fueled up and actually literally like tighten up some a seal that was leaking. That's
a super unfortunate name.
The red team.
I've seen Star Trek. I know what happens to the red shirts.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I was like, did they really call them the red team?
Please tell me someone got a selfie there. They're like, hey, just here hanging out with my rocket, full of fuel. Like how, because it's pretty rare. Yeah, rare that anyone would ever be there doing that. Right?
It is and it isn't. But we do need to remember that when they do load crew onto the rocket, they'll do it while it's fully fueled. So the next Artemis II will have a crew out there on the pad while it's fully fueled. But, once the rocket is fully fueled in like a steady state, it's, relatively low risk. It's, it's sitting there. Yes, it's slightly, it's slightly pressurized, but it's just maintaining. It's not, mass amounts of fluid, and it's not a very dynamic situation. It's more or less a giant, tank of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, and it's under a little bit of pressure, and it has the potential, for something to go wrong. But they monitor it very closely and would know if something is not looking.
When is Artemis II?
So that's kind of the thing that I have a little bit of a problem with.
It's supposed to be 2024 originally.
Yeah, ish. But there's like a 27-month turnaround time between Artemis 1's Orion capsule and Artemis 2's Orion capsule because they're reusing like a lot of the avionics equipment and the seat from Orion 1 to Orion 2. And I just don't understand. I want the answer. Maybe it is out there. Maybe I missed it. I don't understand why they aren't putting Artemis 1 hardware in Artemis 3 Orion and building a new Artemis 2 from scratch. It's like, if you're going to do this, leapfrog it so you're not waiting on, and relying on the success of Artemis 1. They do have a backup because they had to plan for like, okay, well, what if this doesn't come back?
That's the approach, right? I mean, that's their approach, right? One at a time and try to nail it.
But why not like put the new avionics in the second one and put the first avionics in the third one? I just don't understand. That's because that's going to be the bottleneck now, is waiting for Orion for Artemis 2. Most likely that'll be the bottleneck.
So the rocket itself is solid, easy.
It's kind of on track, looking like it's going to get delivered in 2023. It seems like.
So now you need the capsule.
Yeah, I mean,
and this will be the first time outside of SpaceX that the U.S. has launched a human. The first time since SpaceX.
Since the shuttle.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
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 Since NASA has launched humans on their own rocket.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Well,
thanks for interpreting that.
most likely, Boeing's Starliner will fly a crew first.
Okay.
At the beach.
Well,
I mean, that thing seems to be on track for first quarter or first half. Of 2023, but
okay.
We'll
the
see.
Starliner launch system, right?
Starliner launch system.
I'm creating.
We'll see. That has been a little bit painfully slow.
Is Starliner supposed to go on a Vulcan?
Eventually.
Okay.
That's the kind of the continuation plan. But for now, it has all of its, I believe, 6 rides secured with some of the remaining Atlas Vs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Artemis, that just went up, that is a part of the whole broader Artemis thing where we're going to have a base on the moon. Is that right? Or did they just happen to name it and they just copied Andy Weir? They just didn't credit him whatsoever.
No, it is kind of, this is sort of the big major milestone, like major razor flag here moment kind of as far as Artemis goes, because the whole system kind of relies on humans getting to the moon. And that's the way the humans are going to get to the moon is with, Orion and SLS. But then Artemis includes the human landing system, which for now, at this point and in the future is Starship. Obviously, that's a big task. Probably one of the things that might, be something that we're having to wait to see, be perfected and tested out thoroughly before they trust a crew, landing on the moon with it.
Yeah.
But it's also like all the little, like there's commercial landers, uncrewed commercial landers, and a whole bunch of things for the Artemis program. So there's kind of this new era, but it's very much focusing on the moon.
The blue balls from Amazon, right?
Yeah,
that was a part of the
Although
human...
that got denied.
Oh,
although they are,
as they should naturally.
I see what you did there. Yeah, so that's Artemis. That was probably. I mean, for me personally, we put up some video. I'll just roll this footage a little bit. We shared some video of capturing it. I was really happy for once. Our live stream went perfectly.
Your footage was awesome. I was going to say that earlier.
Thank you. It was a long time in the making, and we obviously had plenty of bad things happen with live streams. So I feel like we were owed. We were owed something better this time.
You paid your dues.
Paid our dues big time. So and what's funny is NASA did release this footage, but we were recorded or we were plugged into these cameras. Like we literally had a fiber line from NASA for some of these cameras, that last one included, and we recorded it on our own recorder so we could pull it back in slow-mo because you can't see it in like your 8 frames a second there. But if you watch this on YouTube, you can see it's like really good quality footage, and we recorded it at 4K 60 so we could actually slow it down and post and enjoy it in slow-mo. But then NASA ended up releasing it anyway in 4K 60. But it was cool for us to be able to capture that like straight off the camera pretty much. This was our own camera by Cooper Heim, who placed it out there as a pad camera. But what's nuts is, this is a quarter mile away, 400 meters away, and it's like absolutely shaking the camera like you wouldn't believe.
Wow.
Just so much acoustic energy. Absolutely wild. So we were really happy with how everything turned out. Finally, we had a really good launch. It was a really fun time. Everyone on our team was just so thrilled and so happy to finally see it leave the ground, because it just really caused a lot of stress trying to figure out back and forth. Is it going? Isn't it going? No, cancel flights, skip flights, book flights, get an Airbnb, cancel the Airbnb.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many times we we booked something and had to cancel it and rearrange, and it was very difficult. It was a very difficult thing to manage, honestly, but happy that it's done with now.
So I was watching your feed that night, and of course it was like 2 a.m. or something like that, really late, which isn't that big a deal on my plate usually. But I'm sitting there, I'm watching it, and they put it in a hold, I think at about 10 minutes. They hit a hold and they sent the red team out and everything. And I was kind of like, yeah, all right. So I was just kind of like working on stuff, and I had something else up, and I was kind of like checking back every once in a while. And then I was like, okay, still in a hold. And then I checked back, and it was like the telemetry footage, and it's in space. And I'm like, dude, what?
Oh, no.
I totally missed it. I had to go back and watch it afterwards. But
yeah, it kind of snuck up. Like, I think it was a similar thing for me. Like, even, like T-minus 3 minutes, I had to like wake up and like snap out of it and be like, this is actually going to happen. I'm sort of like, really like, guys,
wait a minute.
Record and stuff and, do all the things. And there's still a few things that we like forgot to record and things like that. But, oh, well, overall, very, very happy with how everything went. Yeah. It was very fun.
Stoked, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. That was a big one. That one feels, because we were fighting that with Firefly, like the conflicts, time conflicts was, we had the van that had to be at Kennedy Space Center for SLS and Artemis. And we were also the live stream provider for the Firefly Alpha launch in Vandenberg. So like those two things were conflicting against each other often with like a 2-day window in between. And I'm just like, how am I going to do this? You physically can't get the van from point A to point B without like a C-130 or something.
Yeah, I was going to say, at what point do we just send that thing by rail or something, or put it in a semi-truck and just ship it off?
Right. I mean, we were
you need
like...
a second van. You need an East Coast van, West Coast van.
You and Bamboo Hip Hop both said the same thing. No, the idea is that I stop doing these things and actually, work on things that non-live streams. I don't want to be a production company, So, that felt really good to get Alpha off the ground, which we should mention on this show, even though we mentioned it in the lost recording of Terra Bithica, that the Firefly had a successful orbital launch on their second attempt ever of their Alpha rocket, and it was fantastic. It was really, really fun to be there for that mission and help share that mission with everybody. It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about Dart. Not Dort.
Dort. Yeah, Dart.
Dort.
Joe,
would be
why don't you
cooler.
talk about Dart?
Oh, put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, DART was a double asteroid redirect mission. Let me make sure I'm getting this right.
Look at you.
I know. Well, there was Didymos and
Dimorphos?
Dimorphos.
Oh, because there was 2 of them. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, can I just say real quick, so before we get into the specifics, like immediately, and I mean immediately after the collision happened and we started getting, the results back and stuff, I started seeing conspiracy theory stuff going around about how in 50 years it's going to crash into Earth now.
Yeah.
Because they redirected it. And it's like, how does this happen so fast? Like,
It was ready. I had my tweet ready to go, man. What are you
God. So for those, I'm sure everybody in our audience is smart enough to know, they didn't redirect the entire thing in any direction throughout the solar system. It was just one, it was the smaller asteroid that's rotating around the bigger asteroid. And I'm getting the names wrong. Which one was the small one?
I think Dimorphos is the small one, right?
Dimorphos.
Didymos.
Diamorphito.
Yeah.
I don't remember already. This feels like forever ago.
But Scott Manley had some amazing footage in a video that he showed that like you could see like the shock wave coming off of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Actual footage? Or like
Dimorphos is the small one.
Okay.
And Didymos is the bigger one. Yeah.
So, according to Andy Law in the comments here, that they altered the orbital period of the orbiting asteroid by about 3 times what they had hoped for. So it was actually, it was a huge success, and it was just a test mission to see if sometime in the hopefully not soon future, if we find an asteroid that's heading our way, if we could direct it in a slightly different direction through colliding it with some kind of impactor, that we could prevent it from hitting us.
And I think the genius thing about this whole test is the fact that they found a binary system like this, where they found an asteroid with another asteroid orbiting it. Mm-hmm. The reason it's so brilliant is it's really easy for them to measure how long it takes the little guy to orbit the big guy, right? You can measure that very precisely down to seconds, right?
Right.
Down to less than a second. You can see how long does it take to go around it entirely, right? So obviously, otherwise, if you have to just try to measure, inches per second difference or millimeters per second difference in the trajectory of the big one, like say we just slammed into a normal asteroid, we have to try to measure precisely how much it altered its big orbit around the sun.
Yeah. Which,
like, if you're talking about a tiny little impulse like that, relatively tiny impulse compared to its total kinetic energy around the sun, like, it's barely a blip. Mm-hmm. It would be very, very, very hard to see a noticeable, measurable difference. Yeah. But if you smash into a little itty bitty guy orbiting around something that is orbiting for hours, and all of a sudden you change it by 33 seconds or 60, I think it was actually like 63 seconds or something. Mm-hmm. I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. Then you can very precisely measure the change before you hit it and after you hit it. How much energy did you actually impart on this asteroid? Because the big fear is, like, these things aren't very solid. They're kind of, they're just loosely clumped together rocks, basically. So if you ram something into it really hard, how much energy is actually imparted into it? Is it a lot? Is it the entire kinetic impact? Is it half of that? Is it a quarter of that? Is it a third of that? So this was really a test on, like, how effective is it to just brute force smash into it? And it turns out it was a great success. It was very effective.
Here's my question. So, like, my first thought was, like, imagine if it had some kind of munitions on it, some kind of explosive device that created, an extra energy. But then I started thinking about, like, the energy involved with the speed that they're traveling up there. Like, would it even make that much of a difference?
Right.
With the kinetic energy from that momentum going,
Like the thing itself just flying into it is the same as an atomic
and
bomb or
that's
something.
that's directed. It's very, all of that kinetic energy is moving at
versus
the asteroid.
just like an explosion.
An explosion, it radiates 360 degrees. It goes everywhere.
Yeah.
So you actually lose a lot of energy just to a blast radius too.
Right.
And so it's actually quite effective too. And that's basically what a rocket engine is, minus the fact that it's not a detonation, but it is a continual release of
So that's the trick. So you put a bunch of Raptor engines on it and just light them up, and then it will really go out there. I mean,
that's kind of what they strapped it to a Falcon 9, and they let the Falcon 9 impart all of its energy into this relatively small little satellite that flew out to it, with all of that energy from the rocket. That's where that energy went, is straight into that little spacecraft.
Now, obviously, if it was an actual planet-threatening asteroid, we would probably want something like a nuclear blast. It might not be like right on it, but enough to like deflect it from a distance or something.
Yeah, it could be. Well, that was the whole theory about like gravity, using gravity to have it pull something else away from it or something, right? Rather than trying to just brute force blast
that's another
something.
way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you could create something bigger out away from it, it would pull it towards that instead of wherever else.
Oh, we got fact checked, by the way. I was way off. Andy Law confirmed. It was 25 times the baseline of what they expected for an orbital change.
Oh, wow.
The change ended up altering the orbit by 32 minutes versus their kind of expectation, which was 73 seconds.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and again, it's a good thing. It's, it's very easy to measure the orbital time, because that's when you're talking about, I don't remember how long it takes to orbit, but, you have it's pretty easy to measure that, when seconds are a pretty decent timestamp there. So you can,
So to the conspiracy theory thing, though, like, it's not, I mean, that idea of like, it's that specific asteroid is going to fly into us is kind of absurd, right? But
yes,
we do not have, we've talked about this before, the n-body problem. It is a problem in astrodynamics that we do not have the math to actually calculate what could happen now, right? Like when there's two or more bodies orbiting each other and one, changes direction or whatever, we don't have the math to actually predict exactly everything. And there's over 1 million asteroids now. So like if obviously the conspiracy theory is wrong and stupid, but I would say that there probably was I would guess that there's probably a conversation at NASA, whoever came up with this mission, like, could this screw something else up? You know what I mean? And then
Butterfly effect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With 1 million asteroids out there circling, 1 million that we know of, right? And I think Scott Manley was the one that created that animation years ago. That's just like the first time we discovered an asteroid, and then the next time, and then the next time. And then you realize like there's this giant belt of, over 1 million of them out there. So like there is some sense of like, oh, we probably should try to make sure this isn't going to screw things up before we do it, because
For sure.
it could have some kind of impact.
But the thing to remember, and it's hard for to communicate like just how how hard it is to change an orbit, like the orbit around the sun. Those asteroids are like, the ones that are in a stable orbit, in the middle of it. If you could smack into them, blow them up with a nuclear bomb, they're still going to be in that orbit. It's like when we do like an anti-satellite test around Earth, and we blow up a satellite. It's not like that satellite blankets the Earth instantly, and it's like, oh no, there's pieces everywhere. It stays in its little tiny skinny orbital path, just kind of gets strewn out, and eventually, sure, over like years and years and years, some of it deorbits, some of it does, has got kicked up a little bit higher, but it almost always stays upon its inclination and its general path.
So it's probably more like the interstellar thing, right? Like the joint that went flying by, whatever it was called.
Yeah, and very elliptical asteroids too. There are asteroids. There are asteroids that coincide. They dip through our orbital plane and things like that have the potential to impact us, of course. And we're monitoring those. But like if we had a really large interstellar object come through that we didn't see prior, that could throw off the orbits of other things. It'd have to be really big, believe it or not.
Really big.
I mean, we're talking like planet size or a large moon flying through randomly, kicking up a bunch of asteroids to get them out of their
there is still the Planet 9 theory, or the Planet X theory, that there's a planet that has like a 50,000 year orbit around, and it's supposed to be like Neptune size, but it would. The theory is that like it's come through from time to time and stirred up, like you just said, comets in the Oort cloud or asteroids in the Kuiper belt, and like that. The math says that some of these asteroids that seem kind of anomalous would make sense if there was this like planet that came through every 50,000 years and stirred things up. So there is a theory that something like that could happen, but we're talking about a planet. Doing it.
Yeah. That's like we still don't fully understand which one spins on its side, Uranus or Neptune.
Yeah, one of the two. I always forget.
Yeah, but like we don't have an answer for that, right? It's one of those.
Uranus is the one.
Yeah. It's like something hit it, but like we, so far away, hard to study, kind of a thing. Like,
there's. I mean, this
it's so cool.
One of those, it's just a brilliant mission though, because they really found a good solution on how to test this.
Yeah.
And total hats off to the teams that made that work so successfully. And Casper was asking in chat, how did they get the math that wrong? That they're expecting,
I was kind of wondering that myself.
It's a fair
73
point.
seconds versus 32 minutes. And again, I think it's based on like the estimates. How loose is this rock? How much of this, impactor is just going to slide right through it like a snowball, versus how much is it going to hit it and actually move it?
Imagine that the looseness of the rock and also determines its density and its mass as well.
Yeah. So we just had to do kind of so there's some baseline estimations of like, we think it could be this. If we see this, then we succeeded. Like, then this was a successful demonstration of this. And it turns out most likely that it was more, more massive maybe, or more less porous or whatever, more dense or whatever than we expected. I'll have to read up on it before we do the Astro Awards for this year.
Oh.
But I do think that's, I think that's kind of where the discrepancy lies.
This has to be the coolest, like most redneck appeasing mission you could imagine, right? Like,
Smash into it.
like this, it is. I mean, obviously there is a movie about this, but like, just literally, like this has to be the simplest, easiest thing to understand. Oh, there's an asteroid coming. What'd you do? We threw something at it and knocked it away. Woohoo! Like this, it is surprising that you would have, from the people that generally would spit out kind of stupid conspiracy theories, not just being excited about this, like, of all of them. Like, if you want to talk about conspiracy theories, there's so many other things where you're just like, sure. Picture of the black hole, huh? It took 12 different stations and you had to stitch the image together? Sure you did. You know, that's like, whatever. That doesn't make any sense to people. This has to be like the simplest, easiest idea to understand, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's another one of those things like we were talking about a second ago. You can make anything first if you add enough, descriptors to it.
Yeah, qualifiers.
I mean, like, we've landed on a comet. We've taken samples from asteroids before. Like, we've touched asteroids before, but this is the first time that it was like we smashed into one with the direct intent of changing its direction. And we did it.
Exactly. Can I bring up a little miniature rant, because talking about like launching that reminded me of the Falcon Heavy launch that we saw or didn't see. I don't know if you guys saw that. So Falcon Heavy, after 2019,
we were there.
That was the second Falcon Heavy mission. There was another one after that, right? Yep, there's another one after that in 2019.
I saw
remember.
Arabsat. I remember that.
Yeah, there's a third. There was the is a something 27. I'm already forgetting, but the third Falcon Heavy was in 2019, and then we waited mostly not for the rocket. The rocket was ready to go basically, but we're waiting for payloads.
STP-2, June
there it
2019.
is, SPT-2. Yeah, SPT.
The Dodd
TP2.
The Dodd Space Test Program. What?
Yeah, is that, I wish.
The DoD, not the Dodd. Okay, sorry, DoD.
So that was the last one in 2019 until Falcon Heavy launched in for the first time in over 3 years. What month was that?
Pretty recent, right?
Heavy, I think that was October.
Time doesn't mean anything.
USF 44 1 month ago.
That's what happened in 2022. Was time stopped working?
Yes, 100,000%. It doesn't say the date.
It's still
November 1st was when this launched. November 1st, so just over a month, 6 weeks ago. And this is a mission like I didn't really plan to go see it. You know, I was like, oh, Falcon Heavy, and my understanding from my recollection, the next Falcon Heavies on the docket weren't going to have that dual booster landing. The boosters were the next three in my mind were either going to be landing dual on 2 different drone ships and expending the center core, or the whole rocket was going to be expended. And so the launch just wasn't going to be that exciting. It's like, oh, I mean, that's cool. Like, it's a big, heavy, loud rocket, but I don't know, half the fun.
The landing.
Hated it.
The landing is for sure the cool, by far the cool part. Then I realized only a week out or 10 days out or something oh, they are doing a dual booster landing. I do really want to see this, but we had just finished driving across the country, saw Alpha launch, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to have to go back for Artemis. And then I got taught, once we realized it was dual booster landing, I'm like, all right, we're going to have to get our van back out to Florida anyway. We might as well get it there early and cover this launch. And the launch, so we were already just kind of running on fumes on stuff. And we had not had great luck live streaming. We had still some teething pains with the Firefly stuff. We definitely had teething pains with the Artemis launch, the first attempts before they did get it off the ground. Then this mission launches, and it's just totally fogged out.
Great.
Completely. We barely saw anything. And it was just it was just the most, I was heartbroken and had to be reminded that I'm hosting a show. You can't just be complaining the whole time, because that's all I did. That's all I did. It was just I can't see anything.
Wait.
We drove out here. We set up at 4
Wait, you can't do that? That's
You can, but it doesn't make for a great show, let me tell you.
Damn it.
So that's basically what I did, was cried that I couldn't see anything, and that we had set up for hours and hours and hours and hours and weren't going to see anything. But it was an awesome mission. It was a beautiful launch and landing, and the landing, although we barely saw any of it, it was still super fun.
Would they
That's my
ever?
rant.
would they ever consider that aspect of it? Like, hey, let's wait until people can see it. So,
well, this was a secret mission anyway, like a top secret, very like under the wraps. We didn't know much about it at all. So I'm sure they loved that it launched during the fog.
oh, really? Oh, okay.
You know
Yeah.
what? I bet they made the fog just so that nobody would see it.
Exactly.
That would be so much more of a fun show if we just made up crazy conspiracy theories the whole time.
Oh,
Here's
there's plenty
why.
of those out there.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah. CNN, Fox News, you know.
Exactly. But yeah, that's that was my Falcon Heavy rant, but it was still awesome, and it did give us an opportunity to like work on the van a little bit more and make it so the van was a big success come the official launch of Artemis I. So there you go. Rant over. I hate fog. Yeah.
What about social media? How do you feel about social media?
Oh man. Are we going on a rant?
Has anything happened in social media this year?
Any certain platforms of interest? Anything happening?
Yes. Let's just say yes.
Path is coming back. Friendster?
Are there any social medias that people actually like? Like all you ever hear is complaints about social media, but we're all still on it, you know?
Generally, I like YouTube, mostly because it's not very much of a social media. It's really just like a
It's more media than social.
video. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a spectrum, right? I think that's how I've described it before. Like at the most social side, you have in-person one-on-one with your friends, right? Real human-human interaction. On the media side, on the far other side, you have going to a movie, right? Or maybe even a play or something like that, where it's in person and it's live and it's the most entertainment you could get from another person. And so all of these platforms, I think, fall somewhere in between there, right? Where YouTube, I would say, is much more on the media side.
Yeah.
Whereas like Facebook, I would put much more on the
Yeah.
social side. Like the values
Definitely.
Facebook brings is the connectedness with the people. Love it or hate it, but that's what its
Yep.
theme is,
Definitely.
right? I don't know where Twitter falls. It's kind of like I don't
Right.
think of Twitter as like a social. Like I guess it's social in the sense that there's a lot of connectedness as a part of the value proposition, but I never like. Unlike Facebook, it's not like you're connected mostly with people that your friends that you actually know, right? It's